The rain had been falling since the afternoon, the kind of steady rain that didn't roar or thunder but simply pressed itself into the evening. It washed over the windows of the small cafe on the corner, leaving long streaks of water that caught the warm light from inside. People who came in shook off their umbrellas, wiped their shoes on the mat, and sighed with relief as the smell of fresh coffee and baked bread welcomed them. Thursday nights were special here. It was open mic night, something the owner started years ago to bring a bit of life to slow evenings. Anyone could walk in and sing, read a poem, tell a joke, or play an instrument. The stage wasn't big. It was hardly even a stage, just a wooden platform with a stool, a single microphone, and an old upright piano pushed against the wall. That piano had seen better days. The wood was scratched, the paint chipped, and one of the keys always rattled when pressed too hard. But people loved it. They said it gave the place character. They also knew it wasn't actually broken, not really, just worn. At the back of the cafe sat a small group of regulars. They came every week, always choosing the same table near the open mic area. They were friendly enough, but they had a habit of teasing newcomers. It wasn't meant to hurt anyone. At least, that's what they told themselves. They liked to call it a harmless prank. When someone new arrived wanting to play the piano, they pretended it was broken or difficult to use. Sometimes they loosened a string or two just a little, so it made a strange sound. They laughed about it quietly, thinking it was just a bit of fun. This Thursday, the cafe was a little fuller than usual. The rain had pushed more people indoors, and everyone seemed grateful for somewhere warm to sit. The regulars were already discussing what kind of joke they'd pull, if any new. Performer walked through the door. They didn't have to wait long. A few minutes after the latest round of applause faded, from the last performer, the door opened again. A young woman stepped inside, blinking as she pushed her hood back. Her clothes were slightly wet from the rain. She held a small bag close to her chest, as if she was worried someone might bump into her. She moved carefully through the room, her eyes drifting from table to table like she was trying to figure out if she belonged here or not. She didn't look like someone confident or bold. She looked like someone who preferred the corners of rooms, someone who didn't speak unless spoken to. Her shoes were worn. Her hair was tied back in a simple way. She walked quietly to the counter and ordered a tea, her voice soft and barely above the hum of conversations. Regulars noticed her immediately. "She looks nervous," one of them whispered. "Perfect for the prank." Another replied with a grin. They waited, watching her as she took a seat near the wall. She sat alone, looking around the cafe as though she wasn't sure whether to stay or leave. For a few minutes, she simply held her tea and watched other people go up to the microphone. Then she looked at the piano. She stared at it in a way that made the regulars lean forward. Her fingers curled slightly around her cup, like she was imagining the feel of the keys under her hands. Eventually, she placed her tea down carefully, stood up, and approached the cafe owner. The regulars tried not to look obvious as they waited. "Do you think maybe I could try the piano?" she asked the owner, her voice low but steady. Of course, the owner replied warmly, "Open mic is for everyone. Go right ahead." But before she could walk toward the piano, one of the regulars stood up and stepped forward with exaggerated concern. "Hey, just so you know," he said, "the piano's kind of broken today. It's not really working. You might want to pick something else." His friend smirked behind him. The young woman paused. Her fingers touched the strap of her bag. Her eyes went to the piano again. "Oh," she said softly. "I don't mind. If it's okay, I'd still like to try." Another regular chimed in from the table. "It's really bad. Like barely playable," someone else added. "Yeah, it sounds terrible. It might ruin your performance." She didn't walk away. She simply nodded, thanked them for telling her, and moved toward the piano anyway. The regulars exchanged surprised looks. The owner started to say something, maybe to explain that it wasn't actually broken. But the young woman gently placed her bag beside the piano before he could speak. She sat down on the wooden bench, which creaked slightly under her weight. Her posture was straight but relaxed. Her hands rested in her lap for a moment as she took a small breath. The cafe already quiet from curiosity, became even more silent. She lifted her hands and pressed a few keys lightly. One key made a dull sound because one of the regulars had messed with the string earlier. Another key sounded slightly off tune, but she didn't look bothered. Instead, she pressed the same keys again, slower this time. Listening closely, as though she was trying to understand what the piano needed from her. She didn't shake her head or sigh or show any sign of frustration. She placed her hand on the side of the piano for a moment, almost like she was greeting an old friend. The regulars watched. Waiting for her to make a face or complain, she didn't. She pressed a short series of notes, simple but clear. The cafe's noise softened even more. A few customers turned in their seats. Someone stopped stirring their coffee. Even the owner leaned forward slightly. Her touch on the keys was gentle, almost careful. She didn't try to force the piano into sounding perfect. Instead, she adjusted her pressure, softened the louder keys, and guided her fingers in ways that worked with the instrument instead of against it. One of the regulars whispered, "Why does it still sound good?" No one had an answer. She played a few more notes, forming a slow pattern that felt like part of a song, but not fully a song yet. People were listening now. The cafe lights reflected on the piano's surface, catching the tiny chips and scratches. But somehow, the old instrument looked almost graceful under her hands. A few drops of rain slid down the windows. Blending into the glass as the room stayed quiet, she still hadn't started a full piece. She was simply testing the piano, exploring it. But even that sounded beautiful in a soft, fragile way. There was something human about it, something honest. It didn't feel like a performance. It felt like a conversation between her and the instrument. One of the regulars who had helped loosen the string shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Is she fixing it?" he murmured. She wasn't fixing it, not physically. But the way she played made the flaws less obvious. She adapted to them, shaping each note to smooth out the rough edges. The cafe owner stood a little straighter, watching her with new interest. Finally, after testing the keys again, she sat up a little and placed both hands gently on the keyboard. It was clear she was ready to start playing something real. The regulars leaned in. The customers leaned in. Even the sound of the rain outside seemed to quiet down. And then, with a soft breath and steady hands, she began to play. She didn't start with anything flashy or loud. She began with a simple melody, one that moved gently through the room like it was being carried by a breeze. The piano, despite its loosened string and worn keys, responded beautifully. Her timing was smooth, her touch gentle but full of feeling. The cafe slowly filled with the sound of her playing, and something about it made everyone stop whatever they were doing. Even people who had been deep in conversation paused and turned. Her melody carried a quiet strength, something steady and calming. Each note seemed to fall exactly where it needed to be. And the piano, broken or not, sounded warmer than anyone had ever heard it before. The young woman didn't rush. She didn't try to impress anyone. She simply played with a sense of honesty that reached everyone in the room. The regulars who had wanted to laugh couldn't even remember why they thought the prank was funny. Something unexpected was happening, and the whole cafe could feel it. The cafe felt different the moment she started playing, as if the room itself took a breath and decided not to let it go. People who had been standing near the door paused before stepping out. A man carrying a box of pastries from the counter stayed where he was, his hand frozen halfway to the lid. Even the group of regulars, who always whispered and joked, now sat completely silent. The melody was simple, almost too simple, but it carried something honest that made it feel alive. The young woman didn't play loudly or boldly. She played gently, with a steady rhythm that wrapped around the room like a warm blanket. The old piano responded in its own imperfect way. Some notes were clearer than others. One still rattled slightly when she pressed it. But somehow, in her hands, those mistakes didn't feel like flaws. They felt like part of the song's character. She wasn't showing off. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. It felt more like she was remembering something personal. Her shoulders stayed relaxed, her expression calm, and her eyes half closed. as though she could see the music even without looking at the keys. No one knew her name. But in that moment, she didn't feel like a stranger. The regulars shifted in their seats. They had expected her to struggle, maybe even to give up. They thought she'd laugh awkwardly or walk away embarrassed. Instead, she made the piano sound like it had been waiting for her. One of them whispered, "How is she doing that?" Another shook his head slowly. "I don't know, but she's really good." The cafe owner stood behind the counter, leaning forward with his hands on the surface. He had heard hundreds of people play this piano over the years, some talented, some funny, some shy, some out of tune. But none of them had ever made the old piano sound like this. He wondered where she had learned to play and why she seemed so comfortable with an instrument most people found difficult. The young woman continued playing, letting her fingers move in smooth patterns. The melody grew richer, but she never played too fast or too loudly. She gave the piano room to breathe. She treated it gently, adjusting her touch whenever a note sounded too sharp or too dull. She adapted with ease, blending the imperfections into the music. Her simple song slowly began to draw more people toward the stage. Some stood near the back, while others moved closer without realizing it. The rain outside kept tapping softly against the windows, mixing with the music in a strangely peaceful way. A young couple near the corner leaned closer to each other as they listened. An older man sitting by the door closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. A teenager who had been glued to his phone earlier now held it loosely, eyes fixed on the piano. There was something in the air, something warm, gentle, and unexpected. The young woman didn't seem aware of how many people were watching her. She just kept playing, letting the melody shift and turn like a small stream flowing around stones. It wasn't a song people recognized, but it felt familiar somehow. It felt like something they had all experienced at least once in their lives, but forgotten until now. When she moved into a slightly deeper part of the melody, one of the regulars swallowed hard. He had been the one who loosened the string earlier, trying to make the prank funnier. Now he felt uncomfortable, like he had interfered with something he shouldn't have. He looked at the other regulars, hoping he wasn't the only one feeling that way. But from their expressions, he knew they were thinking the same thing. The young woman leaned into the melody, just a little, adding a sense of longing, not sadness, but something delicate, like remembering a memory that still means something even after many years. Her fingers moved with care, guiding the sound without forcing it. Someone near the front whispered, "I've never heard that piano sound like this before." Another replied, "It's like she understands it." The young woman didn't hear any of this. She was somewhere inside the music, letting her hands speak when her voice couldn't. After a minute, she shifted the melody again. It brightened, lifting slightly, as if sunlight peeked through the clouds. A few people smiled without realizing it. Even the regulars felt their shoulders loosen. Then, just as the room fully sank into the melody, one of the loosened strings vibrated too loudly when she pressed the key. A strange buzzing sound echoed for a second, sharp and unpleasant. The regulars winced. Someone in the audience flinched. The cafe owner sighed quietly, frustrated with himself for not fixing the piano long ago. But the young woman didn't stop. She paused for only a breath, then shifted the notes slightly, avoiding the damaged string while still keeping the melody intact. She adjusted so smoothly that most people didn't even realize anything was wrong. She played around the broken sound the way someone might walk around a puddle without annoyance. Without hesitation, just gently and naturally, the regulars exchanged glances again. Their prank hadn't stopped her. It hadn't even bothered her. She treated the broken notes like old friends. One of them whispered, "She's incredible." The melody began to soften, drifting toward the end of the piece. Her hands slowed, her touch became even lighter, and the room leaned in without meaning to. The final notes were so gentle that they almost blended with the rain outside. When she lifted her hands from the keys, the cafe didn't make a sound. Not yet. There was a moment, a long stretched moment, when no one breathed. People looked at her, at the piano, at each other, unsure what to do. It was the kind of silence that only happens when something unexpectedly beautiful fills a room. Then the applause came, It didn't start with a single person. It burst from the entire room at once. People clapped loudly, some even cheering. A few stood up, unable to hold back their excitement. The cafe, which had been so quiet minutes ago, now felt alive with energy. The young woman looked almost startled. She blinked, glanced at the crowd, then gave a small, shy smile. She looked down at her hands as if she couldn't believe they were the reason for the applause. The owner came forward, smiling warmly. "That was wonderful," he said. "Where did you learn to play like that?" She hesitated for a moment, then answered softly, "I learned on old instruments. They were never in perfect condition. I just got used to making them sound okay." The regulars felt their stomachs twist a little. They had never expected their prank to meet someone like her, someone who could turn their joke into something so moving. One of them stood up and cleared his throat, stepping closer to the piano. He scratched the back of his head awkwardly. "Hey, just so you know," he said quietly, "we, loosened a string earlier." As a joke. It wasn't meant to be mean. We didn't think anyone would be able to play well with it. The young woman looked at him with calm eyes. She didn't seem upset. She didn't even look surprised. "It's okay," she said gently. "I used to play on instruments worse than this. Thank you for letting me try." Her kindness made the regulars feel even guiltier. They had expected frustration, disappointment, maybe even anger. But she gave them nothing, except a soft smile. The cafe owner gave the regulars a sharp look, but he didn't say anything. He could see they were already embarrassed. Someone from the audience called out, "Play another one." Others joined in. "Yes, please. One more." That was amazing. The young woman looked surprised again. She glanced at the piano, then at the crowd. Her cheeks warmed slightly, but the smile on her face grew. If it's okay," she said quietly, "I can play one more." The cafe erupted in cheers. She settled back onto the bench, placing her hands on the keys again. This time she looked more confident, less unsure of her place in the room. The applause had reached her. The kindness in the crowd had reached her. But before she began playing again, she looked at the regulars. Not with anger, not with judgment, with kindness, as if to say, "It's fine. It's forgiven. Let's just enjoy the music now." The regulars felt something shift inside them, something they didn't expect. And then, with steady hands and a quiet breath, she began to play again, ready to show the cafe that the first melody was only the beginning. The cafe had settled into a warm, excited buzz after her second song. People were talking softly, sharing their thoughts about the performance, glancing toward the piano as if afraid they might miss something. The young woman sat quietly on the bench, her hands resting on her lap, while she took a slow breath. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. Most places she played, nobody listened closely. They treated music like background noise. But here, people were paying attention in a way that felt new, almost strange. She looked toward the crowd, unsure what to expect. The cafe owner gave her an encouraging nod. A few people smiled warmly. Some waited with hopeful expressions, as though wishing she would play a third song without even asking. But before she could decide, one of the regulars stepped forward. He looked nervous, almost guilty. He cleared his throat, rubbing the back of his neck. Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked. She nodded gently and stood from the bench. The other customers stepped aside as the regular led her toward the corner where his friends sat. They all looked uncomfortable, which was surprising, because usually that was the table where laughter never stopped. He looked at her again, his voice low so the rest of the cafe wouldn't hear. "We messed up," he said. "We shouldn't have played that prank. It wasn't fair to you. We didn't know you'd be, well, really good." One of his friends spoke up from behind him. "Yeah, we're sorry. It was supposed to be a harmless joke, but seeing you play tonight made us feel stupid. We shouldn't have tried to make fun of anyone." The young woman listened quietly. She didn't interrupt. Her calm expression made the regulars feel even more awkward. Finally, she said softly, "Sometimes people make jokes because it's easier than being kind. But tonight was nice. I'm not angry. I didn't know what to say at first. She had forgiven them, too, easily. "You're really something," the first regular said. "Not just because you play well, but because you didn't get upset. I don't know anyone who would react like that." She shook her head. "I just like playing. And this place, it makes me feel comfortable." Act. The regulars smiled for the first time that evening. It wasn't their usual mischievous smile. It was softer, more genuine. "Do you come here often?" another asked. She shook her head. "No, I just walked in because of the rain." "Well," he said, "you're welcome here anytime." She gave a small smile and returned to the piano. The regulars watched her with new respect. Still a little stunned by how everything had turned out, the cafe slowly returned to its gentle hum. People were finishing their drinks, chatting about the performance, waiting to see if she might play again. Even though she had already performed twice, her presence created a quiet anticipation. She sat down again, brushing her fingertips lightly over the keys. She wasn't sure if she wanted to play another full song. Playing to pieces was already more than she expected to do when she walked in. She had only intended to stay for a cup of tea as she debated silently. The cafe owner approached her. "You don't have to play more if you don't want to," he said kindly. "But if you ever want a place to practice, you can come here any time. The piano's old, but it loves good hands." She smiled at that. "Thank you. That means a lot." The owner paused, noticing the small bag she kept close. "Are you a music student?" She shook her head. "No, I just learned on my own. Mostly on old instruments people didn't want anymore." He nodded slowly, impressed. "Well, you've got a gift, that's for sure." She blushed slightly, looking down at the keys. The owner took a step back, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She looked at the piano again, feeling something warm inside her, a mixture of joy and something deeper. It had been a long time since she played in front of people who truly listened. She pressed one soft note, then another. The room quieted again, almost instantly. She wasn't playing a song, not yet. She was thinking through sound, letting her fingers drift without structure. It was a habit she had developed years ago, playing what she felt instead of what she was taught. The cafe listened. Even those not watching her directly could feel the gentle notes in the background. She closed her eyes, letting the sound guide her. Slowly, a new melody began to form. It was different from the first two songs. This one was lighter, more playful, like the feeling of warm sunshine after a long storm. Her fingers danced across the keys, moving quicker now but still soft. The piano responded, warm and rich, despite its flaws. The rattling key made a faint sound, but she placed it carefully within the melody, turning it into something that felt almost intentional. People leaned in closer. "She's doing it again." Someone whispered, "I can't believe how she plays like that," another replied. The regulars were quiet for the first time in ages. They watched her with a strange mix of admiration and disbelief. For them, this night was turning into a lesson they didn't expect. A reminder that kindness mattered more than jokes. The melody grew, picking up little waves of emotion. It wasn't loud, but it carried a bright energy that made people smile without thinking. Some tapped their feet softly. Others closed their eyes and listened. The young woman didn't think about the audience. She didn't think about being impressive. She played because it made her feel alive, because music had always been her way of speaking when words felt too small. Every moment of her playing felt like a memory. Maybe it reminded her of the places where she used to practice. Maybe it reminded her of nights spent alone with her thoughts. Or maybe it reminded her of why she fell in love with music in the first place. The cafe lights reflected off the piano, creating a soft glow around her. The sound of the rain softened outside, almost as if it too wanted to listen. She moved into a brighter part of the melody, letting it rise like a sunrise. A few people whispered "wow" under their breath. She didn't hear them. Her world had narrowed to her fingers, the keys, and the sound that filled the room. When she finally reached the end of the melody, she played a series of soft notes that faded gently. Trailing off like a quiet goodbye, the cafe fell silent once more. And then, again, applause filled the room, warm, loud, and full of admiration. But this time something different happened. One of the regulars stood up, and clapped the loudest. His friends joined him. A few customers stood as well. It wasn't a polite applause. It was genuine celebration. The young woman bowed her head shyly, unsure how to react to so much warmth. When the applause began to settle, the cafe owner approached her again. "You've given us a beautiful night," he said. "Would you like something to eat?" "On the house." She blinked in surprise. "Oh, that's very kind, but you don't have to." "I want to," he insisted gently. "Please." She hesitated, then nodded with a grateful smile. The owner guided her to a comfortable seat near the stage, while one of the staff members brought her a warm meal. She sat quietly, her fingers still tingling from playing. As she ate, people approached her one by one. Most didn't say much. They simply thanked her, told her she had made their night better, or shared how the music made them feel. One woman said, "I had a bad day, but your music helped me breathe again." An older man said, "You play with something real. You don't see that often." A teenager said, "I want to learn piano now because of you." Each comment warmed her chest a little more. She wasn't used to people noticing her much. She wasn't used to the idea that something she did could matter to others. The regulars approached last. They didn't try to hide their embarrassment. "Look, tonight taught us something," one of them said. "We were wrong about the prank. And we were wrong to think anyone who sits at that piano is just looking for attention. You showed us that music. It means something. And we won't mess with the piano again." She smiled softly. "Thank you. That means a lot," another regular added quietly. "If you ever need help carrying your bag or anything, we're here, seriously." She chuckled for the first time that night, surprising even herself. As the cafe began to close for the night, people slowly put on their jackets and umbrellas, still talking about the music they had just heard. The rain had finally stopped. The young woman gathered her bag and thanked the owner once more. "Come back any time," he said warmly. She nodded. "I will." As she stepped outside, the air felt fresh, and the street shone with reflections from the streetlights. She walked slowly, her steps light, her heart warmer than it had been in a long time. Behind her, through the cafe window, the piano sat quietly again, still old, still imperfect, but no longer just a prop for pranks. That night, it had found its player, and everyone inside knew they had witnessed the beginning of something they would not forget. He stood there without knowing what to say at first. The room felt strangely still, almost like the air had paused just to hear what might come next. She sat at the piano bench, her fingers lightly touching the keys, not playing them but holding them as if they were the only solid thing she could trust. He walked closer, slow steps, unsure steps, the kind someone takes when they are scared of saying the wrong thing. He had seen her upset before, but never like this. There was a quietness in her eyes that felt heavier than anger. She wasn't crying, but she looked as if she had already cried more than enough for one day. He knew he had messed up. The prank he thought was harmless had cut deeper than he expected. And now he was trying to find words that felt too small for the hurt she carried. She didn't look at him at first. She kept her eyes on the keys, gently pressing one note that barely made a sound, as if she was testing whether the piano still trusted her. He wanted to apologize again, but the word sorry felt like a thin bandage for a deep wound. She finally spoke, her voice quiet. "You think it's funny?" she said softly. "I get it. Everyone here thinks things like this are funny. But music, it's the only thing I have that feels safe. When you played with it like that, it wasn't a joke to me. It felt like you were making fun of the only part of me that actually works." He felt that sentence drop inside him like a stone. He sat down beside her, leaving a small space between them. He didn't try to touch her hand or her shoulder. He just sat there, because he didn't want her to be alone with that kind of pain. "I wasn't making fun of you," he said quietly. "I swear I wasn't. I just... ... I thought you would laugh. I didn't think about how it would feel on your side. I was dumb. I was careless. And I'm sorry. Not the small kind of sorry. The real kind." She breathed out slowly, and for the first time she turned her head a little toward him. She wasn't convinced yet, but she was at least willing to hear him. He knew that was something. He glanced at the piano. "Can you tell me what it's like?" he asked gently. "Music, I mean. What it feels like to you?" She blinked. She wasn't expecting that question. She looked at the keys as if she was seeing them through a different lens. "It feels like the only place where my mind is quiet," she said. "Everything else in life feels loud. Even when nothing is happening, I feel like I'm running from something. But when I play, it stops. The noise inside me stops. I don't have to pretend to be anything. I don't have to be awkward, or too quiet, or too shy. I can just be ... me. Music doesn't care if people misunderstand me. It gives me a place I can breathe." He listened. Really listened. Not the way people do when they nod while waiting to talk. His silence was full of attention. She felt that difference, and it softened her a little. He looked at the broken piece of wood from the prank that someone had left on the floor near the piano. It felt wrong, seeing it there, like a reminder of a moment that should have never happened. "I want to fix this," he said quietly. "Not just the piano. I want to fix what I did to you." She didn't respond right away. She let her fingers slip across the keys again, slowly and carefully, like she was touching something fragile. Then she said, "Words are easy. I've heard a lot of words in my life. Then let me show you," he said softly. Her eyes flicked toward him again, searching his expression. She didn't let him off the hook, but her face softened enough to show she wasn't completely closed to the idea. He stood up, walked around the room, picked up the wooden piece, and placed it on the table. Then he knelt down beside the piano bench again, not to beg but to meet her at eye level. "I don't know much about music," he admitted, "but I know I can learn, and I want to learn how to not hurt you again." Her throat tightened a little. She didn't want to cry, so she looked up at the ceiling until the feeling passed. When she looked back down, something in her expression had changed. Not fully healed, not fully trusting, but open enough for a new step. "What do you want to learn?" she asked him softly. He smiled gently. "Whatever you're willing to teach me." She didn't touch his hand, but she nodded. "Maybe later," she said. "Not today, but later," accepted that with a quiet nod. He didn't push or rush. He simply stayed beside her, giving her space while still being there. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The room wasn't heavy anymore. It felt gentler, as if the air had relaxed with them. She played a soft, uncertain note, then another. Not a full melody, just small sounds that felt like testing steps after a fall. He listened as if each note mattered. Later that evening, when she went home, he stayed behind in the practice room. He sat on the floor with a notebook and wrote things down, plans, ideas, ways to make things right. He knew she deserved more than promises. She deserved effort. The next morning, he woke up early. Earlier than usual? He took the bus across town to a small repair shop that specialized in instruments. He carried the broken piece of the piano with him in a plastic bag. The shopkeeper, an older man with soft eyes, asked what happened. "I messed up," he admitted, "and I need to fix it." The shopkeeper examined the wood, nodded slowly, and said it could be fixed, but would take time. He gave a price that made the young man wince. It wasn't cheap, but he didn't hesitate. "Do it," he said. The man asked why it mattered so much. The young man simply replied, "Because she's worth repairing things for."
Back at school.
The girl walked into the music room and saw the bench cleaned, the floor swept, and the piano carefully covered with a cloth. No damage in sight. It wasn't fully fixed yet. She could see someone had spent time caring for the space. There was a small note on the bench. "Working on fixing what I broke. Not asking you to forgive me fast. Just asking for a chance to show you I mean it. I'll be here after class if you want to talk." She held the note for a long time. She didn't know how to feel at first. Part of her wanted to stay cautious. Another part, the part that heard sincerity in his voice the day before, felt warmth spreading quietly through her chest. She went about her classes but kept thinking about the note. The thought returned in small waves, the way he listened, the way he didn't make excuses, the way he tried to understand her world instead of pulling her into his. By the time the last class ended, She found herself walking toward the music room, almost without thinking. When she opened the door, she saw him sitting on the floor again, reading a book about basic music theory. It was upside down. She tried not to smile, but she couldn't help it. "You're holding it wrong," she said. He quickly flipped the book, embarrassed. "I was testing gravity," he joked weakly. She sat on the bench, watching him. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked. He didn't pretend to be cool. He didn't try to impress her. He just spoke honestly. "Because I hurt you. And because you matter to me more than a prank or a moment of attention. I didn't understand that before, but I do now." Her heart settled into a slow, warm rhythm. She wasn't used to hearing words like that spoken without hesitation or disguise. She patted the bench beside her, and he sat down then softly. She began teaching him one note. Just one. He hit the wrong key 3 times in a row. She laughed, a real laugh, and the sound of it felt like the first bright moment after a long storm. The rest of the afternoon passed gently. They didn't rush anything. They didn't talk about forgiveness or what came next. They just shared a moment that felt honest and steady. Later, when they walked out of the building together, a soft breeze brushed past them. She didn't take his hand, but she walked close enough that he could feel the quiet, trust slowly forming between them. He didn't want to break that gentle beginning. She didn't want to close her heart again. So they stayed in that small, safe space to people trying to understand each other. Step by step. What neither of them knew yet was that something bigger was coming. Something unexpected. Something that would not only test their fragile connection, but also reveal a truth neither of them had ever dared to imagine. And it would begin with the sound of a piano. A sound that would change everything for both of the next morning. Arrived with a strange kind of calm in the air. As if the world itself knew something important was about to happen. She woke up earlier than usual, not because she was nervous, but because she felt something inside her shifting gently like a door opening. Today was the school showcase. It's the one she had secretly dreamed of playing it for years but never had the courage to sign up for. This time, she wasn't sure if she was ready, but something in her heart pushed her forward. She didn't know he had already made his own plan at the same time. He stood in the hallway outside the music room holding a small envelope. He kept flipping it in his hands, unsure whether to give it to her before the performance or after. Inside the envelope was a short letter he had written the night before, along with something else, a copy of the repair receipt for the piano part. He wasn't giving it to her to show off what he had done. He simply wanted her to know the truth. He had fixed what he broke because she deserved that kind of respect. He checked the time. The showcase would start in a few hours. The school auditorium was already buzzing with noise. Students rushed around carrying costumes, instruments, mic stands, posters, and props. But he stayed in the hallway, waiting for her to arrive. When she finally walked in, carrying a sheet of music pressed to her chest, he felt his chest tighten a little. She looked different today, quieter, more focused, but also more sure of herself. She wasn't hiding behind her hair or her notebook. She walked with steady steps, as if the piano inside the music room had given her back a piece of confidence she had lost long ago. She noticed him before he could open his mouth. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then she smiled, a small, warm smile that softened everything around her. "You came early," she said. "I wanted to see you before the show," he replied. "I have something for you." He held out the envelope. She hesitated for a moment, not because she was worried, but because she was curious. When she opened it and saw the letter, she read it quietly. The words were honest, thoughtful, and simple. He didn't try to sound poetic. He wrote exactly what he felt, that he was proud of her, that he believed in her, and that he was sorry for the hurt he caused. When she saw the receipt, her breath caught in her chest. She looked up with wide eyes. "You didn't have to show me this," she said. "I know," he answered gently. "But I wanted you to know the whole truth." She folded the letter carefully and slipped it back inside the envelope. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For everything you're trying to fix?" He nodded. "I just want you to play today without thinking about anything else. Not me, not the prank, not what happened. Just play for you She felt something warm spreading through her chest. "I'm still nervous," she admitted. "Then be nervous," he said softly. "You're allowed to be, but don't let fear stop you from doing something you're meant to do." She looked at him for a long moment, feeling the sincerity in his words. She finally gave a small nod, then turned and headed to the practice piano. He watched her walk away, hoping she believed in herself as much as he believed in her. The auditorium filled up quickly. The showcase wasn't a huge event, but it meant a lot to the students who were performing. Parents sat in the rows, whispering to each other while waiting for the show to begin. Phones flashed. Bags rustled. Teachers checked microphones and clipboards. Backstage, she stood with her hands clasped together, her sheet music tucked under her arm. She could hear the muffled sound of the audience behind the curtain. Her heart beat faster each time someone walked past. When it was finally her turn, the host called her name. A soft wave of applause filled the room. She stepped onto the stage slowly, her legs trembling a little. She didn't look at the audience, she couldn't. Instead, she focused on the grand piano standing in the center of the stage, lit by a gentle spotlight. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed her fingers on the keys. For a moment, she just breathed. The room became quiet. Even the softest cough or whisper disappeared. She felt the silence hold her like a gentle hand. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost shy, like quiet footsteps in an empty hallway. But as the melody grew, her confidence grew with it. The music unfolded like a story she had kept locked inside her for years, finally finding its way into the world. Every note felt honest and raw. She didn't push herself to sound perfect. She simply let the music come out the way it wanted to. People in the audience leaned forward without even realizing it. The soft rise and fall of the melody pulled them in. A few whispered to each other, wondering who she was, surprised by her talent. Backstage, he watched from the side curtains, his chest swelling with something warm and proud. He had always known she was special. But seeing her like this, confident, calm, alive in the music, felt like watching someone discover their own wings. On stage, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear, not worry, not pressure. She felt free. As the final notes drifted into the air, the room held its breath for a heartbeat. Then applause broke out. Loud, warm. Rising like a wave that washed over her, she lifted her hands from the keys, her eyes shining. She didn't smile right away. She just sat still, letting the sound of the applause sink in, letting the moment wrap around her like a soft blanket. Then, slowly, her smile appeared, wide, honest, and bright. When she walked off stage, he was waiting near the curtains. She didn't even think before stepping toward him. He didn't pull her into a hug, but he smiled with such pride that she felt something inside her burst like sunlight. "You did it," he whispered. "I did," she replied softly. "It felt different. It felt like I wasn't small anymore." "You were never small," he said. "You just didn't see what the rest of us see." She felt her cheeks warm at those words. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. But she didn't need to say anything. The silence between them felt comfortable. It's full of things they didn't know how to put into words yet. The rest of the showcase passed in a blur. People came up to her, complimenting her performance. Teachers praised her tone, her control, her expression. Some students looked at her with newfound respect. She accepted every compliment with a shy smile, still not used to the sudden attention. Later, when the hall emptied and the performers packed their things, she found herself walking outside with him. The evening air was cool, brushing softly against their faces. Streetlights glowed gently along the sidewalk. They walked slowly, not in a hurry to reach anywhere. She held the envelope in her hand, the letter inside it a reminder of how much had changed in just a few days. "Do you remember the first time we talked in the music room?" she asked quietly. He laughed softly. "I remember you didn't want to look at me." "I didn't trust people back then," she said. "I still don't trust Isley." "But you've been trying?" "You didn't run when things got difficult," kicked a small pebble along the path. "I didn't want to run. I wanted to stay. I still want to stay." She looked up at him, her eyes steady. Why? She asked softly. He took a slow breath. Because you make things feel real. When you play, it's like the world stops pretending. And when you talk, even when you're quiet, it feels like something honest is happening. I don't know how to explain it better than that. She looked down, her heart fluttering softly. She didn't expect such words. Not now, not like this. But they felt true. They reached the bus stop. A soft breeze moved her hair as she stood there, thinking. He waited beside her, giving her space, the same way he had done since the day the prank went wrong. Finally, she turned to him. I don't know what comes next, she said, but I know today meant something. And I know you helped me get here. I didn't make you good, he said, smiling gently. You were always good? I just fixed something I broke. The bus arrived, slowing down with a soft hiss. She stepped onto the first step, then paused. She looked back at him, her eyes warm. Will you be at the music room tomorrow? She asked. He nodded. Of course. Good, she said. And for the first time, she touched his hand lightly. Because I want to teach you more than one note. He blinked, surprised and moved. I'd like that, he said quietly. She stepped onto the bus, found a seat by the window, and waved as the bus pulled away. He watched until the bus turned the corner and disappeared. He stood there for a moment, letting the night settle around him. Then he smiled a warm, hopeful smile and began walking home. The next day, she arrived at the music room earlier than him. She opened the piano cover, placed her fingers on the keys, played the first few notes of the melody she had performed the night before. It sounded different today, brighter, lighter, full of new beginnings. When he walked in, she looked up and smiled. Ready to learn? She asked. He nodded. Only if you're ready to teach. They sat side by side, their shoulders almost touching, and began where they left off, with honesty, patience, and a connection that had grown from something unexpected. And as they played together, the room filled with something new. Not just music, not just healing, but the quiet, brave beginning of something that didn't need a label yet, something real. And this time, there were no broken pianos, only two people finding their way note by note.